talking about the war. You're from the South. There's only one war that matters, the Civil War. See, the Civil War kind of captures the imagination of Americans in a way that really no war ever has. Certainly the wars that are just as important in American history, if not more so. World War II, facing the destruction of the United States and democracy around the world. The Allies have failed. American Revolution's fight for the very existence of the nation. The Civil War is going to decide just what kind of once and for all, what kind of nation the United States is going to be. So all sorts of dramatic incidents, curious episodes, they're all very interesting characters. And all these, and all of it, you can see how ordinary individuals trying to cope with the stresses, the strains, and the shortages of the war, and all the issues that come up. Now, I'd say most of the kind of more famous characters are ones I heard about: Robert E. Lee, Ulysses S. Grant, Jefferson Davis, Abraham Lincoln. Like them or not, they are interesting figures, an interesting past. But Arkansas itself has its own share of interesting characters, interesting episodes. Even though the state as a whole did not play a critical role in the Civil War, some important battles did take place in the state, or at least of local importance, but would have an impact on the course of the war. Like we mentioned last time, the Civil War, most of the activity, most of the most important battles took place in the area east of the Mississippi River, particularly Tennessee, southern Louisiana, most particularly the Virginia, Maryland area. The Virginia, Maryland area had battles going back and forth constantly for years. You have the first battle of Bull Run, the second battle of Bull Run, you have the first battle something, the second battle something, and the third battle something. In southern Louisiana, the taking of Baton Rouge and New Orleans by spring of 1862 was a critical loss for the South, but after that war in the southern Louisiana is pretty much over. That whole area will be under Union control. But Arkansas, even though it is right on the Mississippi River, was already kind of forgotten about by both Union and Confederate commands. Still somewhat sparsely populated. Confederate leaders decided they could concentrate their efforts more on other areas of the Mississippi River or areas east of the Appalachian Mountains. And Union leaders decided to adopt pretty much the same strategy. That's not to say they were ignored entirely, just that Arkansas was simply not a priority. Arkansans had scrambled to try to shore up the defenses of the state. 21,000 men had volunteered to the Confederate Army. Albert Pike had made some very clever diplomatic deals with the Native American tribes of the Indian Territory to ally them for the Confederacy, hoping to stop the assault by the Union Army from the Northwest. Now, after the initial frustrations in 1861, the United States Armed Forces had decided on a long-term strategy, blockading southern ports and trying to concentrate on taking up the major river valleys. In early 1862, this would be primarily concentrating on the Tennessee and Cumberland rivers in Tennessee and the lower Mississippi River. But although the Union Army is having some success in the Trans-Appalachian West, it wasn't getting much anywhere in the East, which was continuing to confound Union efforts. Now, the Confederacy itself was built on the idea of states' rights. That is making each state as somewhat as independent as possible, basically kind of loosely organized under this new government in Richmond. But in a time of war, though, with the South having basically short of everything compared to the Union, short of money, short of men, short of ammunition, short of manufacturing, the South did not have anything to spare. And because the Confederate government decided to concentrate on listening to a few generals and concentrate just very specific areas, like such as defending the East, other states, and feeling an increasing pressure as the war progressed, to look out for themselves at the expense of the rest of the Confederacy. For example, in 1865, when Robert E. Lee's soldiers, the Army of Northern Virginia, are in trenches at Richmond and Petersburg, the uniforms falling apart because of the long wear and strain of the war and battle, the boots falling apart. The North Carolina militia has 25,000 blankets and uniforms sitting in a warehouse. Uniforms could have gone to the Army of Northern Virginia. North Carolina refused to give these up because they were for North Carolina use only. As one historian said, the South would end up dying, the Confederacy ended up dying of states' rights. Now, because the Confederacy had such few resources to spare, they're trying to concentrate it in a very limited area. On one side, you can see just what they're trying to do is concentrate on one area, wear the North out, and hope that peace afterward would be favorable to the remaining outlying states. But in the meantime, that meant the states that the Confederacy is not concentrating on defending were largely on their own. Arkansas leaders, including Governor Rector, realized Arkansas was in that position, that they were on their own by and large. If a concerted, massive Union effort was made to take Arkansas, the Confederacy might not respond. Now, the Confederacy recognized Arkansas as an important source of men and supplies, but as far as defensive purposes, like I said, it's not an important priority. Now, warfare did come to Arkansas. The battle was very difficult because of the wildly different terrain and weather. Sometimes were uncooperative. And transportation was extraordinarily difficult. Roads in many areas were non-existent. And a lot of supplies and weapons that armies were using by that time required a lot of wagons, some hundreds, sometimes even thousands, depending on the size of the army, to carry these supplies from one point to the next. When they're non-existent roads, that's extremely difficult. Often have a lot of wagons breaking down, the wheels breaking off, especially in the mountainous areas of northern Arkansas. be very, very difficult, sometimes almost impassable terrain. In fact, Union advances in northern Arkansas later in the war will be slowed not so much by any Confederate resistance, but by just the difficulty of moving from point A to point B. Have any of you ever driven on the roads in that part of the state? In fact, around the Eureka Springs area. You're constantly having to downshift to keep your car from going too fast downhill, then have to race back uphill again. Very tight, narrow lanes, trying to keep your car on the road. Kind of a really very dangerous roads. In fact, you ever traveled between Fort Smith and Fayetteville before Interstate 540 came in? That road was almost impossible to drive on. You had essentially a very narrow two-lane highway hugging the mountains going from Fort Smith to Fayetteville. If you got behind a truck, which was almost always because Springdale and Fayetteville have a lot of big trucking companies, it'd take you forever to get from one point to the next. So Arkansas had very few rail lines available at this point. They had tried to concentrate on building railroads, but they had in the 1850s, but had not gotten very far. About 1862, they feared a Union invasion from Kansas, realized would not materialize, in fact would never materialize. Instead, another invasion comes along from Missouri. I'm going to take a look at your map here on major Civil War battles. First of these most important battles is the Battle of Pea Ridge. Okay. This is Arkansas. Now, the Union Army is planning to do is a two-pronged invasion of Arkansas. Essentially, they're planning to do is come down here, northwestern Missouri, come down the Mississippi River. Now, keep this northwestern advance to be taking Fort Smith here in the Arkansas River. Move in, take out Little Rock. And they control most important parts of the state. Arkansas River is still a major source of transportation. In fact, still is a major source of barge traffic. At Fort Smith and Little Rock, you take out the major financial, governmental, and commercial centers in the state. All manufacturing was in the state, was in Little Rock. And that, you control Little Rock, you effectively control the state of Arkansas. And the Union Army realized, though, with a lot of Arkansas troops were being shipped elsewhere, and they made a concerted effort on Arkansas that tie up the Arkansas troops even further. If the Union Army tried to try another invasion elsewhere, Arkansas troops would be unable to respond. They would be tied up with the Union forces here in their own state. Unfortunately, though, until late in the war, the Union Army had a lot of difficulty of coordinating these kinds of major offensives. They could have an offensive in the west and then one in the east, but never one at the same time. And so because of that, the Union Army is doing well in the west, but in the east, it's making no progress at all. In a couple of places, slipping and almost losing the war. The Union invasion of northwestern Arkansas was compounded by the continuing secession efforts in Missouri. And there's a lot of the secessionist sentiment in parts of southern Missouri. There's also a lot of Union sentiment there as well. A lot of Arkansas Unions, like we said, moving from Arkansas into southern Missouri. And because the U.S. Army was having to fight secessionist forces of Claiborne and Jackson, it's kind of slowing down their efforts to move into Arkansas. But by February 1862, Union Army was able to ready to advance into Arkansas. In the second prong of this invasion, hoping to get to Helena. That town was a major port for Arkansas. Now, this effort here in northwestern Arkansas will be led by Union General Samuel Curtis. He's going to have 20,000 men. Curtis had a had a good reputation, stable officer, very competent. Curtis hoped to be able to sweep aside resistance here in the northwestern counties and push down into Fort Smith, the Arkansas River, to achieve the first goal of the Union's efforts in Arkansas. And understand that is a really kind of very close, tight-knit area here. It's only about 60 miles from about Fort Smith to Fayetteville, and about 30 miles or so to the state line. Fayetteville, Springdale, Bentonville, you're practically in Missouri, one county over. Well, a lot of the Confederate spies and scouts realized the Union Army is on the march. And Confederate troops were sent to both directed areas. And Confederate troops, primarily 15,000 men under General Earl Van Dorn, are coming to meet Curtis's troops. As is not unusual, the Union Army usually outnumbered the Confederates. The Confederates usually inflicted much higher casualties on the Union Army. Old Van Dorn for the Confederacy, Curtis for the Union. Now Van Dorn slipped in, moves past Fayetteville, and is trying to meet Curtis's troops just as they cross the line. And from there, Van Dorn's hoping that they could use a victory over Curtis to move into southern Missouri and aid secessionists in Missouri. They could, with the Claiborne and Jackson's forces, in addition to these forces under Van Dorn and others, they could bring Missouri out of the Union and under Confederate control. I believe this was in line with what most people of Missouri would want. The two armies ended up meeting just north of Rogers, just shy of the state line at Pea Ridge. Dorn's original 15,000, joined by a few more local troops, bringing his total strength to 17,000. Albert Pike has managed to bring in a force of Native Americans from Indian Territory to Pea Ridge, which also helped shore up Confederate forces. On March 7th through 8th, 1862, the battle would commence. This would be the largest battle west of the Mississippi River in the entire Civil War. It's also called the Battle of Elkhorn Tavern. See, during the Civil War, both sides would be giving different names to the different battles they're fighting. One side would usually name it after the nearest town, the nearest landmark. Another would be named after the nearest river, which is why the Battle of Bull Run, sometimes called the Battle of Manassas, after Manassas Creek. Battle of Antietam, named after Antietam Creek, but the other side calls it the Battle of Sharpsburg, as close to Sharpsburg, Maryland. In this case, the Elkhorn Tavern. In fact, if you ever go up to Pea Ridge, I recommend that area. I recommend touring the battle site. Touring these battle sites kind of explains these battles, how these men lived, in ways that really textbooks really can't quite catch all the flavor of. You can see how the armies moved about, how the battle unfolded, and just why one side is prevailing over the other. Especially battlefields like Gettysburg are really, Vicksburg are really good at that. The Elkhorn Tavern basically is a tiny little bed and breakfast in this area. And it's known as Elkhorn because over the door there was a pair of elk horns over it. Kind of practically became its trademark. And this tiny little kitchen where people come in and eat, a couple beds where people would sleep for the night. That's well known in the area. This is where something, and the battle is briefly used as headquarters. And outside, the two sides are fighting back and forth for hours, trying to take the small building. Well, the two sides ended up going back and forth for these 2 days, neither one able to score a decisive knockout punch. Union forces are scattered. Only about 11,000 will reach the battlefield. Union forces took very heavy casualties, but held steady. But the Confederate Army suffered 2 very critical losses. Union forces managed to kill 2 generals, James McIntosh and Benjamin McCulloch. Our armies have more than one general sometimes, one man in command, but often lower grades of generals involved. This is one of those men in this case. McIntosh and McCulloch, both very capable men, well liked by their troops. And when they were killed in battle, the men became confused, disoriented, a little bit demoralized. And the Confederate effort against the Union forces slowly began to unravel. On March 8th, the Confederate forces were running low on ammunition. Van Dorn decides to order his troops to retreat from the battlefield, retreat south of Fayetteville back here into the Boston Mountains. Technically, this battle is a draw. Union forces do not give chase. The Confederate forces retreat from the battlefield. Basically, what happened was the advance in northwestern Arkansas was stopped. In the long term, this is would simply be a delay for Union forces. They would later come back into Arkansas and take the area. But the Confederacies turned out to be their one and only chance to move into southern Missouri. after this, secessionist, what remained of the secessionist elements still fighting Missouri fell apart. And Missouri remained a very strong, steady Union state. Well, Curtis, after this, so instead of going down here to the Arkansas River, having to push through Van Dorn's forces, he pulled back a little bit, decides later on to try to push across northern Arkansas here toward the east, across to the Mississippi River. Curtis ended up fighting various scattered Confederate detachments. And again, approaching Batesville. And by summer, we moved across most of northern Arkansas. Most of the battles in this instance of Curtis's advance across northern Arkansas were somewhat minor. But by the summer of 1862, Curtis is encouraged now to move against Little Rock. Hoping maybe he can move this area, move down Little Rock, will be able to take another fourth city of the state without much problem. Well, Curtis's plan seemed to be going plan. And Van Dorn tried to check Curtis's advance. They kind of moved as soon as they pulled themselves together, they moved parallel to Van Dorn, to Curtis. Basically kind of taking position between him and Little Rock. But all of a sudden, the course of the war changed east of the Mississippi River, and Van Dorn's forces are ordered east of the Mississippi River. Well, now Rector realizes most of the Confederate forces now have left Arkansas, and Little Rock is now very badly exposed. In fact, there were some politicians in the states west of Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Texas about discussing whether they should secede from the Confederacy. And later in the war, because Confederate draft policies, South Carolina threatened to secede from the Confederacy, one that started the whole thing to begin with. Well, Curtis had a second in command, a man named General Frederick Steele. And Curtis is placing him in charge of planning the Little Rock operation, something which Steele very eagerly accepted. Governor Rector and his cabinet are making plans to evacuate Little Rock to move the state capital. Rector called up any available volunteers for state service. In fact, some Texas regiments were being ordered to the east of the Mississippi River like Van Dorn's forces had been. Rector realizes these forces are moving through Arkansas, stops them, and orders them to help the defense of Little Rock. Well, all seem to be about to just completely disintegrate Arkansas. Confederate High Command in Richmond realizes just how serious the situation is for the West. That Arkansas was in danger of collapsing. And now with the Baton Rouge and New Orleans under Union control, if Arkansas fell, there would not be a whole lot left to defend the Mississippi River. The Confederacy would very quickly be divided, and the war would be over much, much quicker. In fact, Arkansas had fallen, and the Mississippi River had fallen much earlier, the water had earlier, over maybe more than a year earlier. So the Trans-Mississippi Department was established by the Confederate government in May of 1862. Basically, as part of the Confederate War Department. Sole purpose is to come up with defense strategies for areas west of the Mississippi River. General Kirby Smith is placed in command of all Confederate forces west of the Mississippi River. CSA, this case means Confederate States of America, Confederate States Army. And Thomas E. Heineman is now placed as command of all forces in Arkansas. Heineman's kind of excited about this. Former congressman, he knew the state well, saw a lot of opportunities for not only his own future if he should do well, but I'm very excited about the prospects of defending his adopted home state. Now Heineman very quickly realized how dangerous the situation was for Arkansas. That the Civil War, yes, could be over in 1862 for Arkansas. Nothing that had changed how they're doing everything. Well, Heineman was not timid about using his authority. Rouse how desperate the situation was, he used all authority at his disposal to shore up the defenses of Little Rock and get the Army supplies it needed. Heineman drafted every able-bodied man he could find, paying no attention to any Confederate exemption policy. In fact, because of the Confederate draft law that had been passed, there were several exemptions being made. You could pay $500, you could be exempt from the Confederate draft. If you own 20 or more slaves as your planter class, you could be exempt from service. If your teacher had 20 or more students, you'd be exempt from service. I'd be in trouble with things. And because people with $500 cash on hand or had 20 more slaves to be exempt from service, it's led to a lot of charges of this being a rich man's war and a poor man's fight. The war being fought for the rich planters, but being having to be fought for by the poor, the working man. Well, Heineman said it makes no such thing because he's grabbing everyone he can find and throwing them in the army. So Heineman immediately begins ordering small factories, manufacturing plants to be established to create the supplies Arkansas needed, uniforms, boots especially. Our boots are a very important part of the war. You wouldn't think much about shoes and the course of war, but these men, the infantry, the bulk of the army, are having to travel on foot over non-existent roads, very rough terrain. And you have to travel a few miles, your shoes start to wear out over time. And if your shoes are wearing out, sometimes a lot of your men end up going barefoot. Now it gets cold or wet, that causes a lot of problems to your army because they can't march very far when their feet are half frozen, or they haven't marched through water barefoot. Sometimes you step on things, your feet get injured, and they get foot fungus. It's disgusting partials, a little bristling under your toenail. It's not the least of your problems. My wife hates that because she cringes every time she sees it. And yes, you have a lot of feet are a lot of injuries, a lot of opens, cuts, and wounds on them. Having to march through water, especially in hot, damp conditions, And sometimes the infections will set in, slowing your army down even further. And that's one of the primary reasons why the Confederate Army stopped at Gettysburg in 1863. One, it was an important railroad and road junction. Secondly, there's a shoe factory there, boots for their army. The Confederate expedition into Maryland in 1862, the Antietam campaign, slowed down because most of Robert E. Lee's troops were barefoot. Their shoes were worn out. And most of the available roads, and a lot of the roads in Maryland at the time, were paved with gravel. You ever try to walk on gravel barefoot? Not comfortable. Try doing that about 50 or 100 miles. So a factory was established in Arkansas under Hyman's command to manufacture ammunition, boots, other military equipment. Ranks were made to produce other such non-military items as salt. Hyman ordered the state militia to be placed under his own command, commandeered all state-owned equipment for Confederate purposes. And men above and below military age organized into home guard units. That is last-ditch efforts, the very old and very young. The teenage boys, 15, 16, 17 years old, men 50 and over, those would be the very last line of defense for the Confederacy. And there actually would be cases where men like this would be being used. One battle in Virginia, later in the war, 1863-64, they're taking cadets from the Virginia Military Institute, really just college-age students, 17, 18 years old, kids, and throwing them against the Union Army. Perhaps he ended up losing that battle. This incident didn't happen in Arkansas, but it's really kind of a funny story. I had a Civil War professor in a graduate school who told us the story, and I thought it was funny. There was one case of an underage soldier in a Texas unit. And the commanding officer was writing in his records later how they found out how old this boy was and how they found out about it. It said in his report, quote, he was 15 and his mama came to take him home. I'd be embarrassed. So what happened to that young man after that, we have no idea, but kind of interesting story. Scorched earth policy was ordered any retreating Confederate units be ordered to destroy anything of value between them and the Union Army. The Union Army could not live off the land. And the people of Arkansas did not react kindly to these measures. The draft at the beginning was not very popular because of major riots in the North. As with the Union Army draft policy. They being pressed into service for manufacturing and the military. State property being used for by the Confederate Army. And so Arkansans simply were not liking the suddenly very intense regimentation that's being demanded of them. Hyman ultimately took the step of declaring martial law, that is essentially suspending the civilian governments in a lot of areas and placing everything under direct military command. That is, everything is under the control of the military. This meant the military officers could seize any property of any military value, horses, mules, wagons, food. Civil law suspended in favor of military law. And this has shocked a lot of people that suddenly the states' rights issue that everyone has been talking about is suddenly being usurped by this seemingly dictatorial Confederate government. Arkansas is seceded on the basis that the North is becoming a dictatorship, about to tell them exactly how to run their lives and run their culture and society. That is, get rid of slavery, whether you like it or not. And now, the Confederacy is ordering them to taking the same position, but on different issues. You're under control of the military, whether you like it or not. Free election, civilian law, no longer exists. It says it's not sitting well with Arkansans. In fact, in some areas, Hindman is more hated than the Union Army. But these desperate measures in 1862 saved Arkansas for the time being from a Union takeover. Or, from your point of view, prevented the Union takeover. Well, Hindman effectively got to Arkansas in a fighting strength, prevented Steele and Curtis from moving on Little Rock. But Hindman now was so unpopular across Arkansas that Confederate High Command relieved him. And was placed by General Theophilus Hunter Holmes. But we won't see, this isn't the last of Hindman we'll see. Now all this is going on while Hindman had time to organize Arkansas defenses. Steele and Curtis had their own problems that which prevented them from advancing further into Arkansas. So even though they had moved across the northern part of the state very effectively, and with having a lot of the Unionist sentiment, the area was not overwhelmingly Unionist. A lot of secessionists, a lot of avid supporters of the Confederacy. And this meant the Union Army had a very long, very overextended supply line in hostile territory. Even though they were able to move across very quickly, their offensive had been starting to slow down. By the time they were reaching the Batesville area, it slowed down even further, especially as they stopped trying to consolidate the forces and plan on moving to Little Rock. This had given Arkansas, the Confederates, a vital time to reorganize and re-prepare their defenses. In the meantime, the window of opportunity Curtis and Steele had, if they moved fast enough, they probably could have taken Little Rock, but that window of opportunity very quickly, slowly vanished. Summer of 1862, later summer 1862, the Union forces are unable to advance any further. Basically, defensive just kind of peters out. And so, with that, by summer 1862, Steele and Curtis basically pulled out of Arkansas. Now, even though Governor Rector had been elected to a 4-year term in 1860, the wartime constitution it changes to 2 years. And Rector was not very popular with a lot of the secessionists and the ardent Confederates. In fact, Rector was bitterly criticized as being incompetent, corrupt, and coward. So much so that when General Hindman had repeated and very openly and vocally leveled these charges against basically the man he had made governor, Rector challenged Hindman to a duel. But the duel never went through. time and basically ignored it. But 1862, Confederates within the state government were so incensed at the rector that they pushed for early elections, saying that 1862 we are now going to have the two-year election process. Challenged by Harris Flanagan, a Confederate officer, Rector challenged the validity of this election, saying that this election was illegal. He was elected to a 4-year term. But the Supreme Court, who didn't like Rector either by this time, orders the election will be held. And Flanagan ended up winning the election